I'm Richard King. I'm chair of HHSS, and when I heard about the Creative Communities classes, I was excited by the prospect to do something experimental that would allow me to bring my expertise on the representation of Native Americans to Chicago. And Chicago is really sort of a perfect place to think about the representations of Native Americans because quite literally Indians are everywhere in Chicago, from place names to public art to really our origin stories, even the city seal. Right, the objective of this class is to prompt students to think about the uses and understandings of Native Americans and to engage with representation and interpretation. Right? Perhaps more specifically, I'd like my students to both understand how Native Americans are made present and how they are also disappeared in our everyday lives, and encourage them as creative practitioners to be able to really sort of work through what it means to do their work in a context of erasure, appropriation, and invention. Right? Wow, should have timed this better. Right. Columbia itself is a really great starting point for this, right? Because Columbia is named in honor of Columbus and the Columbian Exposition, and it really prompts us to start where we're at to think about these things, right? And so one of the things I want our students to be able to do is to restory, in a sense, and be able to look at multiple stories, to both think of Columbus as one who did not discover America or Indians, and who is actually perhaps better thought of as a mass murderer, right? And this kind of displacement or unsettling is at the heart of what the class is about. Right? The class is also about prompting students to think about community and to engage community, right? And to think about multiple interpretive communities, right? Everything from museums to art worlds, everything from anthropological practice to public policy, right? And kind of making the class up as I go along. It's really sort of an emergent class, and it may look different than it sounds today, right? But what I want students to do or be able to do is to simultaneously study community and find ways to make and connect to community, right? And I'll do this through through three different kinds of class exercises or engagements. One is what I call reflective practice, the second is skills building, and the third is ethnographic engagements, right? And we start the very first day of class with a reflective exercise in which individually and collectively we unpack our stereotypes, what we carry around and think about when we imagine Native Americans, right? And this processing both, I think, takes down the walls between students and also prompts us to be sort of at ground zero and be more open to what we might be studying and engaging with moving forward, right? I also want the students to, in a sense, to understand the stories that they're telling without recognizing it and to restory, in this case, Chicago, right? And so one of the things that I'll be asking students to do really early in the semester is to collect and unpack place names and really sort of create a narrative map of Chicago and wherever they're from, right? So that they can look at the place names and understand how they're located in relation to indigeneity and to think about the legacies of settler colonialism, right? This is a map of the trail of Indian trails historically mapped onto Chicago itself. And this is a geography project in which the place names from Indian languages are translated into English, which is a sort of a rewriting of our landscape in a very different way, right? All of which is made to sort of displace students in a powerful kind of way. Like Gabriella, I want to work with partners across campus, and so I'll be working with archives to help students engage and unpack their biases as well as historical biases, right? And so we will use the World Columbian Exposition as a key site to engage with those biases and think about those and develop a kind of critical literacy and develop tools to be more critically literate, right? This is my first time with this fun technique here. We also will be doing ethnographic excursions. We'll be doing lots of field trips During the course of the semester, we will take one to the Field Museum. So after reading about the history of the Field Museum, we will go look at what the Field Museum has emerging. We're going to do a gallery tour there and have a talk from the curators about their emerging exhibition, which is really reworking how they're imagining indigeneity. I'll send students out to a Blackhawks game to interact with fans, so we can think about playing Indian in Chicago today, right? Which, you know, is, I mean, the top image is from Philadelphia, but it was too good to pass up on. We also will think about calls and efforts to reinvent the Blackhawks logo and how those kinds of, what's at stake in those kinds of reinventions and what they mean, I think, both for students and for broader communities. This is an actual alternative mascot that's been developed. The Blackhawks have not bitten on it, not surprisingly. Right, finally, we will engage with the American Indian community in Chicago, right? And we will go to the American Indian Center. An important part of this is really to remind students that Native Americans are still here, that they are telling their own stories, and that those stories matter, right? That there's a great value in honoring and recognizing that presence, and I thank Ames for her work on the land acknowledgement, which I think is a piece of that broader process, right? Looking at this survivance is also important to help our students become what I would call situated settlers and allow them to engage with sort of their positionality, right? So in a sense, we're going to end on this sort of claiming public Indianness as a way to hopefully celebrate the tenacity and the persistence of Indigenous people and really be at an uneasy place at the end.